Varsity Moore was 23, bright-eyed, and full of restless hope. She had come to New York City with nothing but a suitcase, a few acting headshots, and a dream that refused to die. Days were auditions, rejections, and endless cups of cheap coffee. Nights were lonelier. Her tiny apartment echoed with the hum of the city that never noticed her. Then came the offer. Her manager, with a half-smile and a glass of wine, said, "There's a man, very wealthy, very private. He's looking for a wife. For 1 year." Varsity thought it was a joke. But when she heard the amount, $8,000 a month, her laughter faded. The only conditions: she must be obedient, never ask questions, never enter his office, and never, under any circumstance, fall in love. It was absurd, immoral, unreal. And yet, when desperation meets opportunity, choices become blurry. That night, Varsity signed the contract that would rewrite her life forever. The first few weeks felt like stepping into someone else's life. The mansion was enormous. Marble floors, chandeliers, endless rooms echoing with quiet. Servants greeted her as Mrs. Ashford, a title that still felt foreign on her tongue. William, ever composed, treated her with a kind of old-fashioned courtesy. He opened doors, pulled out chairs, and asked about her day, though his tone was always measured, distant, like he was reading from a script. They dined together in silence most nights. He'd sip his wine, nod politely, then excuse himself and disappear into his study, the one room she wasn't allowed to enter. The rule intrigued her, but she didn't dare ask why. During parties, the whispers followed her like perfume. "She's half his age. A gold digger, obviously." Peter, William's son, never bothered to whisper. He'd meet her gaze and say coldly, "You think money can buy love, Miss Moore? My father's already made that mistake once." His words burned, but she smiled anyway. This was a contract, not a fairy tale. A year of luxury for a lifetime of stability. That was the deal. Yet sometimes, when the house was asleep and the moonlight spilled through the hall, Varsity heard faint music from behind the locked door, the sound of a piano, soft and sorrowful. And every night, that melody pulled her closer to something she didn't understand, the heart of a man she was never meant to know. The gala was dazzling. Chandeliers glittering, champagne flowing, violins filling the room with music that felt too perfect to be real. Varsity stood beside William, smiling for photographers, pretending she belonged in that world of diamonds and secrets. Then she met her. Jennifer Ashford, tall, poised, and effortlessly cruel. William's ex-wife. Jennifer's smile never reached her eyes as she leaned in and whispered, "Enjoy it while it lasts, darling. He only married you because of his father's will." Varsity froze. Jennifer's voice dripped with venom. "He needs to stay married for 1 year to inherit the estate. After that, your little fairy tale ends, and you'll walk away with nothing." The words hit harder than any slap. The orchestra played on, laughter echoed around her, but Varsity could hear only the rush of blood in her ears. Could it be true? Was she nothing more than a contract? A pawn in a game of money and pride? That night, she couldn't sleep. William sat by the fireplace, reading the newspaper. She watched him for a long time before asking softly, "Do you ever regret marrying someone for convenience?" He looked up, startled. "What do you mean?" "Nothing," she said quickly, forcing a smile. "Just thinking." But inside, her heart trembled. Over the next few days, the mansion felt colder. William seemed distracted, his face drawn with worry. One night, as Varsity passed the study, she saw him burning letters in the fireplace, old yellowed envelopes with handwriting she recognized. Brenda Moore. Her mother's name. Her breath caught. Why would he have letters from her mother, who had died years ago? Why destroy them? The next morning, William left early for a meeting downtown. The moment the car disappeared down the drive, Varsity's pulse quickened. She walked to the study door, the one he had forbidden her to open. Her hand trembled as she turned the handle. The lock clicked open. Inside, the room smelled of smoke and dust. Papers covered the desk. Old photographs lined the walls. And there on the desk, she saw it, a framed photo of her mother, smiling, standing beside a much younger William Ashford. Her knees weakened. Her whole life, her mother's struggles, her mysterious kindness from strangers, suddenly began to make sense. And in that moment, she realized. She had never been chosen by chance. The air in the study was thick with dust and memory. Varsity's fingers shook as she flipped open the old photo album lying on William's desk. Inside, a picture that shattered her breath. It was her mother, Brenda Moore, smiling in a faded Polaroid. Beside her stood a young William Ashford, his arm around Brenda, and in her arms, a baby. Varsity. Her knees nearly gave out. She ran her fingers over the image, her vision blurring with tears. The truth she had never known, the connection she could never have imagined, was staring back at her. When William returned that evening, she was waiting in the living room, the photo trembling in her hand. Her voice was low, but sharp as glass. "Who was my mother to you?" William froze. His face went pale. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, quietly, he sat down. "Brenda," he began, his voice heavy with nostalgia, "was my closest friend. We met when we were both struggling actors. She was radiant, full of life. Everyone loved her, especially me." He looked into the fire, eyes distant. "But she chose someone else. Your father. I left to build a life, but I never forgot her. When she got sick, she reached out to me. She was worried about you. She asked me to promise that if things ever got too hard, I would take care of you." Varsity's throat tightened. "So you married me out of pity?" William looked up, eyes glistening. "At first, yes, I thought it was duty. A promise I couldn't break. But then—" He hesitated, pain flickering across his face. "Then I saw you. How brave you were. How determined. You reminded me so much of her, but also of yourself. I didn't want to control you, Varsity. I wanted to protect you. But somewhere along the way, I fell in love with you." Silence filled the room. The fire cracked softly, its light flickering between them, two people bound by lies, promises, and something far more complicated than either had expected. Varsity stared at him, her heart torn in two. The anger inside her fought against the ache of compassion rising beneath it. He had lied. But he had also kept a promise born from love. And for the first time, she saw William not as the man who bought her silence, but as the man who had quietly carried her mother's memory all these years. The house had grown silent, not with comfort, but with the kind of silence that presses on the chest. Days passed like ghosts. Varsity moved through the mansion carefully, speaking little, thinking too much. She avoided William, though his shadow lingered in every room. She wanted to hate him, for lying, for deciding her life without her consent. But at night, she remembered the way he had looked when he said, "I fell in love with you." Was that a lie too? Or had it somehow become real? One evening, as she was packing away old letters, she opened a drawer she had never dared touch. There it was, the contract. Her signature beside his. A promise written in cold ink, 12 months. $8,000 per month. And at the top of the page, the start date. The end of the year was just 2 weeks away. Her hands trembled. She took a deep breath, walked to the fireplace, and watched the flames flicker. Then, without hesitation, she fed the contract to the fire. The paper caught, curled, and turned to ash, like everything false between them. When William entered moments later, his eyes widened. "What have you done?" Varsity turned toward him, her face calm but her voice steady. "I've burned the contract," she said. "I don't want your money, or your mansion, or this agreement that keeps us apart. I just want the truth." Her eyes softened. "And maybe, I still want you." For a long moment, neither spoke. Then William stepped closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "No more lies," he said. "Only love." And for the first time, his smile wasn't guarded. It was real, fragile, and deeply human. The morning after the fire, the mansion felt different. Lighter, freer, almost reborn. The ashes of the contract still sat cold in the fireplace, but for the first time, neither of them felt bound by it. At breakfast, William looked at Varsity across the long dining table. "We should start over," he said quietly. "No rules. No money. No secrets." She smiled softly. Then let's make new vows, not on paper but in words. And so they did. Standing by the window where the morning light streamed in, they promised each other something real: respect, honesty, and love that wasn't bought or owed. Even Peter, once full of anger and suspicion, came by that evening. He looked uneasy but sincere. "I was wrong about you," he told Varsity. "You're not here for money. You stayed for him. Thank you for making him happy." It was the first time he had called her by her name, not the gold digger. Weeks passed, and life became beautifully ordinary. They took walks in the garden, shared stories over tea, and learned to laugh again. William continued his quiet business work, while Varsity, encouraged by him, decided to return to acting. Her first audition in years felt terrifying, but when she came home breathless and said, "I got the part," William's face lit up with pride. "What's the role?" he asked. She grinned. "A woman who marries for money, and finds love instead." He chuckled. "Sounds familiar." On opening night, the small theater was filled with laughter, tears, and applause. William sat in the front row, his silver hair glowing under the lights. When Varsity appeared on screen, radiant, alive, he felt something stir inside him that he hadn't felt in decades: youth, hope, joy. After the final scene, she walked down from the stage and found him waiting. Her eyes shimmered as she whispered, "You kept your promise to my mother. Now let me keep mine, to love you honestly." William took her hand. "And you kept mine, to live again." As the audience clapped, the two of them stood there quietly, smiling. Proof that love doesn't follow rules or timelines. It finds us when we stop pretending, when we let go of fear and open the door we were told never to touch. For William and Varsity, that door had finally led them home. Years later, the grand lights of an award ceremony shimmered across Varsity's face as she stepped onto the stage. She was no longer the struggling girl who once lied for survival. She was now an actress celebrated for her honesty, grace, and talent. Holding her first acting award in trembling hands, she looked at the audience and smiled. "When I first came to New York, I believed success was measured in money, fame, or comfort. But life taught me something else. Love is the only contract that never expires. It's written not on paper, but in the choices we make, every single day." The crowd erupted in applause, but her mind was somewhere else. Back home, in the quiet mansion that had once felt like a prison and now felt like peace. Later that night, she returned home. William was asleep on the couch, glasses slipping from his nose, her award resting beside him as though he'd fallen asleep waiting for her. She knelt down, brushed a strand of gray hair from his forehead, and whispered, "Thank you for keeping your promise, even when I broke mine." On the wall nearby hung a framed photograph: her mother, William, and herself. 3 lives once separated by time and secrets, now bound by love and forgiveness. The fire crackled softly, filling the room with warmth. Varsity sat beside him, smiling through tears. Her voice, gentle, steady, lingered like a final line from a story that had come full circle. Sometimes, love begins as an obligation, but ends as a choice. The truest, bravest choice we'll ever make. "What would you do," she whispers to the audience, "if love started with a lie, but ended with truth?" If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, share, and subscribe for more emotional English stories.